Howdy everyone, and welcome back to Coffee and Science. I am your host, Professor Parks, PhD, and with me today I have the incomparable Blue Marble Science, a citizen scientist. But we used to, back in the day, we used to call them amateur scientists, but as you're going to find out, although I think most of you who are currently here already know, as you're going to find out, there's nothing amateur about what Blue Marble Science did. But before we get into that, I just want a few announcements. First, I'd like to mention all the folks in the chat. Howdy Clive Wells, Steamy Cup of Reason, Mr. Malort, Carl Edwards, George Hans, Caliban, I believe you're new. I haven't met you before. And so a couple other announcements. I just recently put out a video talking about essentially rebranding my channel, and I know what I want to do now, and I want to see if I can actually stick to it. So on Sunday mornings, or at least Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern, at some point I'll figure out what that is, etc. I will be hosting Coffee and Science. On Saturdays, at the same time, I will be hosting Saturday Morning Science, where I will literally be doing science. You get to, if you want, you get to watch me reduce data, design observation strategies, that sort of thing. And then I'm going to have something on Wednesdays, which is going to kind of a free-for-all. It's not going to be live. It's going to be an edited show. Maybe sometimes it's going to be a news program. Sometimes it's going to be educational about one specific topic. But we'll see. That's still a little bit in the works. But probably the most exciting thing for me is I have put together a Patreon, and I don't really like the whole salesmanship thing, but as I described in the video, one of my goals is to do public outreach and to enlarge our public outreach here at George Mason. And so all proceeds for the Patreon from patrons will go immediately or go directly into outreach here, either through the observatory or with our student organization, Photo. And I am just amazed that I already have a patron, Dora Naku. I know I'm mispronouncing her name, but Dora, thank you very much for becoming a patron. I'm going to let them know that there is there is a funding stream coming in from this channel, so I'm sure they will be thrilled. Yes, Clive. In a way, yes. I think it's a large commitment of time, but I think that what I need more now is more rigid schedule. I think, I don't know, I find myself doing better when I have more things in the fire and definitive deadlines for those things. But that's here nor there. Let me welcome in Blue Marble. Howdy, Blue.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. So again, thank you for being here today. And
my pleasure.
I would just like to start off with the question I ask every time, which is, what is your favorite sci-fi? Any medium, books, movies, what have you? What is the thing you like, or what is the sci-fi thing you like most?
What was my favorite sci-fi movie? I would easily say that had to be Star Trek. Going back to the original stuff.
Like the show?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I really did.
Yeah, I grew up on the
fascinated me at that time, and how much stuff they could get right and get wrong all at the same time.
Yeah, I grew up on. I think that was the first time. The original series is the first, like, consistent sci-fi that I had when I was growing up. So I grew up on Kirk and Spock. Let's let's see. I'm seeing in the chat. Obviously, apparently, I'm still having audio issues. Apparently, Blue, you are low, very low on Blue Marble. Let me see.
I think I cranked my volume up a little bit.
Oh, you're fine on my end. So it's definitely something going on with my audio.
OBS maybe.
Yep, as always.
Yeah, OBS can be evil when it wants to.
Let's see. Let's try that. No. How about now?
Let me give you a test. Test. See if that helped anything.
All right. Where did that go? Same. Seems muted. All right. Try now.
Alright, now let's try it that way. And I could try, I'm straight out of the microphone into Zoom right now. I might try going through voice meter and see if that does anything.
Actually, I think I just made it worse. Hold on. Let's try this.
Speak up, Blue. That's all I got.
Hold on. That seems to be... Fudge. What is going on? Audio. I think I might be losing it entirely. It's a technical workshop. Yes, it is. Always seem... I thought I had that figured out. Hold on. Let me hear what they're hearing.
Yeah. It looks low in Zoom for me, too. What I'm seeing here. I don't know. What I'm seeing here. I don't know.
Is it better? They say it's much better.
Carl said, yeah. Carl says it's better. Whatever we did, or whatever you did. I didn't do anything.
All right, sweet.
Carl says it's better. Whatever we did, or whatever you did. I didn't do anything.
Well, let me mute this. Hey, I can tech. Holy crap. I think the echo was that I had my laptop on. Anyway, all right. So yeah, Star Trek. But so really, the one thing I wanted to bring you on is because you did you reproduced a fundamental experiment. You did so in a marvelous way, in just I am continually amazed by it. It's so good that you donated it to one of the top universities here in the States, or one of the top, at least, state universities here in the States. So I was kind of wondering if you would first kind of start off by talking about your background, and then your scientific background or what have you, and then really just what about the experiment really drove you to actually just creating the whole thing.
Yeah, let's see where to start with all of that. I don't know. I guess
you may be muted.
No, I'm not muted. Can you hear me? Test 1, 2. Says I'm not muted. What's going on? Can you hear me?
Great. Now I can't hear him.
Oh. Yes. Steaming Cup of Reason says loud and clear. Live says not muted. I can hear you, Rob. Yeah, somehow you've turned me off. Oh boy,
Hmm.
isn't technology wonderful?
Somehow I managed to turn the volume all the way down. Anyway, so I'm sorry, I missed all of that.
Okay, well, nothing happened. That's
Okay, so yeah,
yeah,
all
we were
right.
just doing mic checks.
Um,
Yeah, I think like like most of us, I'm sure Rob as a kid, yeah, and a lot of the people that I see out there in the chat, we all had that passion for science related things, engineering related things growing up, uh, and that pushed me into uh, looking into an engineering career when I got to the university. Uh, and in particular, I was really interested in electrical engineering in those days. Uh, but I ended up working in the air pollution control field. Uh, so I got exposed to all kinds of different things throughout my career there, including some research and development stuff. Uh, and that's sort of that's sort of been my background. Things like amateur radio fascinated me when I was young. I got into that, and, one thing or another. Um, and then, but I didn't do a lot of this sort of thing as I didn't carry it on as a hobby necessarily. I got more involved and more interested in woodworking, really. Uh, I like that. I like doing that. I like working with my hands, but
yeah,
woodworking was always something I enjoyed doing.
my
But
dad
then I
was also a
found this
woodworker.
crazy world of flat Earth, and I started watching various attempts by people who would try to do something like the Cavendish experiment and just make a total mess out of it. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I wonder. I remember doing this in physics lab way back when, 52 years ago or more. I remember the thing, but I didn't pay that much attention to it then. It was one of those little tabletop deals.
Hmm.
So I started thinking about what Cavendish actually did, reread his paper, 10 times, thought about it a bit, and I thought, I could build one of those just like he did. I wonder what would happen if I did that. I wonder if I could actually do that and duplicate or come even close to duplicating the results the guy got. Because you got to admit, it was absolutely phenomenal.
Hmm.
He got within 1% of the value we use today.
Yeah,
And he didn't know what the value was. We know what it is. We know what it's supposed to be.
and this was back in
So
what,
one
1780?
thing, I'm
Like,
sorry, go ahead.
well, this was back in 1780. When was the experiment?
He did the experiment in 1790. Well, he published his paper in 1798. So I assume the experiment used up probably the bulk of 1797.
So yeah, he managed to do this before the 1800s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And incredibly enough, he got that close. Now, he never, of course, you get called on this quite often. He never actually came up with the gravitational constant. It wasn't used in those days.
Mm.
Newton had simply said the apparent force of attraction is proportional to the product of the masses divided by the square of their distance, uh, which obviously implies some form of constant has
Yeah.
to be there. But it wasn't really used like that until toward the end of the 1800s, I think. I think C.V. Boyce was maybe the first guy that actually used it in the conventional way that we use it now.
You know,
So what
I
Cavendish was
don't think
doing was literal.
I
I'm
was just
sorry.
gonna say I don't think I actually knew that. I thought I think I was under the impression that G was a fairly because obviously when we learn physics, we don't really learn the history of it, and I really haven't looked into the Principia too much. And so I'm actually that's interesting. I had not known that G wasn't a thing yet when Cavendish was around.
Yeah, it wasn't. And so the title of the paper that Cavendish published at the Royal Society said determining experiments to determine the density of the Earth. And that's literally the data that he reported was a value for the density of Earth of 5.48 specific gravity, effectively, right?
Yeah.
But of course, if you go back now and it would have been very easy for him to provide a value for G. You got everything you need, right? He certainly would have known what the acceleration of gravity is for Earth, and he could easily have come up with that G value from that. From the density, he also knew the diameter of the Earth to a very good level of accuracy. I think he stated the diameter is 41,800,000 feet or something like that. It's amazingly close to what we use now.
Do you know how that value was derived, or how that value was found?
The diameter of the Earth?
Yeah, that he used.
I don't know specifically where he got his number from, but by then it had been very accurately measured by a guy named D'Alembert, a French guy, when they measured the Paris meridian all the way from Dunkirk down to Barcelona.
Oh yeah. I'm familiar with that.
All right, you heard about and which of course was the basis for the length of the meter to begin with. That's where that all came from. So yeah, he had a very good number for the diameter of the Earth. He now knew the density, so you obviously know the mass of it. And he could easily, from knowing little g, then you could easily come up with what big G had to be.
And he was within like what, 1%?
Within 1%.
How close did you get?
I got within 0.6%.
Not bad. Beat old Cavendish.
I never thought it would be that close, but it worked out that way. Now, fair dues. I had advantages that old Henry didn't have. I could, instead of looking at a vernier and tiny little minute movements, and having to make those measurements physically by staring at that thing for hours on end, I had a laser.
That's true. Yep.
I had a laser, and I could amplify the rotation of the beam by a factor of 10 very easily. And then I could use software. I didn't even have to do anything really. I could use software to track that laser spot and give me the maximums or the extremes of the oscillations. So if anything, I attribute the accuracy I was able to get just to the fact that I probably had better measurement techniques than Cavendish did. If I had done it all manually the way Cavendish did it, I don't know that I would have gotten that close. I doubt I would have. Well, I did one set of measurements like that manually, and it was exhausting, to say the least.
Yeah, I can only imagine, particularly the time scales we're talking about. I remember your streams, just watching that red dot go back and forth.
Yeah.
But we're talking about that before we came on, and it kind of romanticizes the idea of the scientist. You were saying like the scientist with the lab coat who's mixing chemicals in the lab, and For astronomers, people think that there's a, you're sitting there at night looking through the telescope, and nothing really could be further from the truth at this point. I mean, it's a lot. When it boils down to, is a lot of hard work, a lot of tenacity, and unfortunately sometimes tedium.
Quite a bit of it. Uh, 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 and you take the good with the bad, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's all part of the process. It's not all romantic. A lot of it is what you guys saw. There's, gosh, who knows how many hours of video sitting out there right now. And I didn't even publish all of it. Some of it's still left unpublished, but many, many, many hours of sitting watching that thing. Uh, so that's what a lot of people miss, I think. Yeah, you're very correct about that. They get the idea that it's really easy to do these things. No, it isn't. Uh, it's not difficult, but uh, it's not something you can do in the short term. And you've got to begin with a proper design of the experiment that gives you some faith that the thing is going to even be able to produce results that you can use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I think that is not emphasized enough, particularly with uh, those people who want to do citizen science. They think they want to take shortcuts and not properly think through what the experimental design is, and actually be able to control what needs to be controlled to get the precision that you have to in order to be able to see particularly small effects like G, big G. So, um, yeah, which kind of reminds me. So you did this. You did this experiment. This kind of classic experiment. I mean, do you think that's the basically the take home lesson from doing this is how to do a proper experiment?
Yeah, I think that was really what I was trying to, more than anything, trying to show everybody. Uh, Having gone through a few of those things professionally in the past, uh, I wanted it. I wanted to get away from the idea that as you and I were joking, before the show, you don't just wake up and say, "Oh, it's Saturday. I think I'll do a Cavendish." No, you won't. you can you can wake up and say, "Oh, it's Saturday. I think I'll start thinking about doing a Cavendish." And a year from now, you might have something.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way that works.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the takeaway I wanted everybody to have from it is that there's a whole planning process that you go through to begin with. You've got this idea that, and it was all laid out for me, so I didn't even have to think up anything. All I had to do was look at what Cavendish did and say, okay, let's make one of those. But it's not even that simple.
Mm.
Now you've got to start thinking about, well, can I really duplicate Cavendish? Let's see, Cavendish had 350-pound lead weights he used. Uh-oh. We got a problem. I have no idea where I get 350-pound spheres of lead in the first place.
Yeah.
And even if I got them, I have no idea how the hell I'm going to pick them up because it's just me. I don't have anybody helping.
Mm-hmm.
So how am I going to do that? Well, the answer is forget that. We're not going to do that. We're going to go with a smaller amount of mass. Okay. Well, we've all seen these little tabletop things. So yeah, sure, you can use smaller mass. No problem with that. But now we got to know some characteristics about this torsion balance. And we've got to start thinking about the torsion element itself and what that could be made of and what is going to give us enough deflection that we can accurately measure it without being so ridiculously slow, in its period of oscillation that we'd never be able to trust the test data because it could have just drifted over a period of, 2 days.
Yeah.
So all of those things come into play.
Yeah, and I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was you ran into a kind of a hole in your in the knowledge of. As far as I know, you didn't know what he originally used for a torsion wire, or what gauge it
Yes,
was.
yeah, that's the problem. That is a problem. Cavendish gave us a description of the wire, and he called it uh, silvered copper.
Silver copper.
Silvered
Silver
copper
copper.
wire.
Okay.
And he gave us a weight of it. So he gave the weight in grains per foot or something. So you could back into, figuring just using the density of copper, you could back into an approximate wire gauge from that. But still, silvered copper doesn't really tell you anything. I mean, what does that mean? Is it a copper wire that's been coated in silver? Is it a silver copper alloy? What the hell is it?
No
And
idea.
after looking through a bunch of literature going back that far, there was a material that came out of China in those days that they referred to as white copper. The Chinese referred to it as white copper, and I think it was an alloy. Well, I know it was an alloy, but I think it was a copper nickel silver alloy.
Mm.
But that's all we know about it, right?
Yeah.
And I was never able to even find anything close to it, material wise. So now what do you do, right? I thought about trying a regular, just soft drawn copper, and that does not work. I proved that can't be done. Doesn't have enough tensile strength.
Yeah.
By the time you get it large enough in cross section to have enough tensile strength to hold up the torsion balance itself, it's too damn big from a torque standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't get any movement at all out of it.
Okay.
So we ended up testing actually regular carbon steel guitar strings. That first series of tests, that's what I used. Then I used some beryllium copper as part of the second series of tests. And finally, I switched it to tungsten, which is what most of today's experiments seem to use.
Has enough strength, but is thin enough that you can actually see it oscillate, see it twist.
Yeah.
Stephen Cuff Reason would like to know what gauge of torsion wire did you finally settle
on? When I originally designed it, I used actually two different small masses. And the first test series that I did, consisting of 16, I think, total tests, used 330 gram masses on the torsion balance. And for that, I used a 0.007 inch diameter wire. The later test with beryllium copper and with tungsten used a larger small mass of 780 grams. And there the wires were 0.008 inch diameter.
So really thin. What I'm getting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, ask any guitar player what an 8-gauge E string is like. That's what they call it, 8-gauge. It's not really 8-gauge. It's 0.008 of an inch.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's very fine wire.
Huh. Yeah, your discussion or description of the finding the right wire for the torsion balance is, one of the things that, for me, is sort of the frustrating part of research. Is it's almost like banging your head up against the wall as you get to a certain point and you realize, well, there's something I don't know, and now I have to do trial and error to get that piece so that I can continue on to do the next piece. When I was trying to do modeling of star spots, not to get too far into the weeds, but I constantly I ran through 3 different observation runs, which ultimately proved to be basically useless. But I had to do it in order to figure out why that strategy didn't work. Um, so yeah, it's there's a lot of work. What I saw, what I gained from your experiment, from watching your experiment, is there's a lot of work that never really gets seen on the back end. Um, there, because there's a lot with what you were just describing. You didn't know what the torsion wire was supposed to be, and you basically had to figure it out on your own. And so I think that's a vital piece of information, or a vital lesson that anyone who wants to do science needs to understand. Because I do fully believe that anyone can do science, assuming that they are open-minded, are honest, and is willing to actually put in the work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That is that's the wonderful thing about science. Now, probably most of us are never going to have a particle accelerator in a garage. You know. uh, it's unlikely, but there are plenty of other things that we can do. Lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like this. It doesn't require, anything larger than half of a normal two-car garage. That's how much space you need.
Hmm.
So, it's quite doable if you're willing to, and you can get decent results like we were able to show, if you're willing to put the work in.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a unique problem in one respect, Rob. And that is that, normally when we're doing some science, research sort of work, we've got tested, proven test equipment that we already know works, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we already know all those gizmos and gadgets that we've got sitting around will give us a measurement of current flow or voltage or whatever we're measuring. We know all that. In this particular case, we're building the test equipment itself. And what the hell do you test that with? That's the problem.
Yeah. So,
and there's no instruction book that says, okay, now you've built this thing. Good job, Blue. How do you run it? I don't know. I don't have a book. Nobody told me.
mm-hmm.
So you got to discover those little nuances of the apparatus as you go. And that's what I went through about 3 or 4 months worth of, just playing with it.
Mm-hmm.
Not really trying to make any measurements, just trying to see, what made the most sense and what seemed to be giving the most repeatable results from it. When do you move the big weights? At what point in the oscillation should you actually move them? Just silly little things like that.
Yeah, but fundamental things. You need to know what your machine does before you can get anything out of it.
Yeah, that machine's got a personality to it, sort of, so to speak. You got to figure out what its personality is.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I look at it. And what does it like and what doesn't it like? What can you do to it that it really hates? And you find that out pretty quickly. Raise the garage door. It really hates that. Don't do that.
Don't have an earthquake.
Yeah, don't have earthquakes. Was that not amazing?
Yes, that was amazing. That was awesome. And sometimes you get fun things like that where you make discoveries that you had no idea you could make with the instrument that you had. So
yeah, for those in the listening in the chat that aren't aware of what I'm talking about, I was doing the last planned test. I was never going to do another one. And we set that thing up on a Saturday morning and started operating it. And I don't know, half an hour or so into it, all of a sudden, the little laser dot was no longer just moving left and right. It was bouncing up and down.
Not supposed
Well,
to do that.
yeah, and I've seen that before. And I've seen it do that, but only because I bumped the cabinet.
Mm.
If I bump the case, what I would do is, what it will do is cause the entire torsion balance, which is a horizontal pendulum, to also start swinging forward and backward like a gravity pendulum. And that's changing the incidence angle of the mirror vertically. So that's where you get that little up and down movement. And you could measure the period of that oscillation and see that it's exactly what it should be for a pendulum that length in this environment here. So anyway, half hour into it, we started seeing that happening, and I was thinking, what the hell? I mean, I haven't been anywhere near this thing. I'm sitting over here 6 feet away from it. Nobody bumped anything, no trucks, no nothing. And all of a sudden it starts doing that. What's going on? And the longer it went on, the more people in the chat started postulating, well, maybe there was an earthquake. Don't know. So we started looking around. I couldn't find any evidence of any kind of seismic disturbance. And then somebody said, wait a minute, they just had a 7.2 magnitude quake in Haiti. Really? I wonder if that's what it was.
Nice.
So I sent the data down out to the USGS people, and they looked at it and said, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's what you saw.
Nice. From Haiti.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Jesus. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
You know, science works.
Yeah.
It's always good to know that when you're looking for something else and you figure out that, oh yeah, this bit of science also works. So are you planning on doing any other sort of fundamental experiments, or is this it? Or essentially, what are you planning on doing next?
Well, I keep toying with the idea and would love to do a Foucault pendulum if I could find a suitable place to do one. But it's pretty pointless, I think, to try to make one that's 8 feet long. I mean, I need to find some place where the ceiling that's a couple hundred feet tall. If you don't, you're going to get that elliptical oscillation of that thing, which quickly overwhelms the procession.
Yeah, you don't think you can build your own tower?
Yeah, I could. Gonna have to take a big GoFundMe for that one. But I've also thought about maybe fiddling around doing a Coulomb type torsion balance too. See if we can knock off that constant as well.
Yeah.
That might be fun.
You'd only have only a few more after that. I don't know how you'd get Planck, but yeah. I just want to address, kind of going back to the Cavendish. We have Dan the Waterman in the chat, and Dan is I don't know if flat Earth is the right word, or global skeptic. Folks seem to be changing the goalposts on us, but he says lead is more attracted to magnetism than described. That comment aside, I know that there was a lot of criticism, or a lot of, I guess, lack of a better word, criticism that, what you were doing wasn't actually showing gravity. What you were doing was electrostatics or density disequilibrium. So, what can you say about how you ruled those out?
Well, in fact, I started out concerned about the electrostatic issues. it's very possible that that can happen. But Cavendish got away with it, and with no apparent. He talked very briefly about electrostatic influence, but in 1798, that's just a handful of years after Coulomb did his work, so it wasn't all that well known and understood by those guys.
Makes sense.
And Cavendish had built this thing out of wood, and he didn't have any problem with it. And I thought, well, I'll give it a try and we'll see, but I don't know. And as time went on, when I was in the initial phases of observing this thing, I was noticing at times some fairly odd behavior. I could put grounds, for instance, on parts of that case and cause the balance to move. So it became, pretty obvious that electrostatics were affecting it.
Okay.
And that would be surface charge, sitting on that wood. I had done something that Cavendish didn't do. That is, I had put that thing in a very controlled atmosphere there in the garage with heat and HVAC in there, and I had put a finish on the surface of the wood. So I kind of made the ideal situation if you're going to have an electrostatic sitting there. That would be a static charge. That's how you would go about doing it. Those are the things you would want to do. Make a nice insulating surface. That's perfect. So I could prove that that's what was doing it, just by using a material like sand, which itself is very good at holding electrostatic charge.
Mm.
I mean, hell, we make glass out of that, right?
Yeah.
Good insulator. So I did some of that, and proved that that's what was going on. And then simply I took the machine apart and put a copper foil lining inside it to effectively build a Faraday cage. Grounded that, the problem, of course, went away.
Huh.
So that's what you do with electrostatics. That's all you can do. We can't eliminate them. What we can do is control them. Mm-hmm. I can force it to be where I want it to be. I want it to be. It's fine. I don't care if the outside of that damn wooden case has got static charge sitting on it. That's not affecting the balance. It's the inside.
Mm.
But other things can happen too. I mean, you can also have. This was something that Cavendish was really concerned about. Heating one side of the case and not the other side produces a little circulating air current inside there. And that circulating air current is going to affect it.
I would not have thought of that, actually. But yeah, it makes sense.
Cavendish actually ran some tests to prove it, where he heated the lead balls, the big lead weights, those big 300-pound things, heated them up and then brought them close to the case. And of course, they radiate heat, and you get some conductive heat exchange there just with the atmosphere between them. And he was able to cause that to happen. He postulated it would happen, and then he proved it could. So what do you do about that? Well, you keep everything at the same damn temperature. That's what you do.
Yeah.
Again, we can't eliminate the effect, but we can control it.
Control the variable, yeah.
Yeah, it's another control variable. So, those are at some point you get to you come to the point where you say, okay, I've controlled the temperature. I've not used any ferromagnetic material in this thing. It's all diamagnetic. The wood that the torsion balance is actually made of, the lead weights, etc. The wires were beryllium copper. Everything's fine. It's all diamagnetic. So that's been taken care of. You just run out of things to say, this is what's causing it to move.
Hmm.
Now all I've got left is I move those big masses and the balance moves towards the big mass.
Mm.
And if I switch the position, it moves the opposite way. So I've got no other way of explaining it.
Well, I do remember. I don't remember who it was. Probably it was Tony. It was really getting on you for, well, you're not really proving mass attracts mass because it could be density attracting density or what have you. And I think you replaced one of the weights with a 8 pack of Coke.
Yeah, I did that.
And lo and behold, it
Yeah.
worked.
Now, I freely admit I did not prove that mashed potatoes are attracted to buttermilk. But at what point do you stop with this silliness? You know,
Yes. Yes. At
at
some
what
point,
point do
just
you
have
say,
to.
okay, that's enough? Uh, we are genuinely looking at mass attracting mass, and I'm not just going to try to, test every possible combination of materials to see if there's some other underlying hidden effect going on. It's working the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think that's uh, looking at it from as a professional scientist. I don't think that's uh, your job in a way, in the sense that you created the experiment, you ran through the tests that you thought were appropriate. Um, you talk about how you identified what potential variables could be affecting it aside from gravity, and you tried to control them as best you can, and then you went forward and got your results. If someone then comes around and says, "Well, what about this?" or "What about that?" I think it's on them to create an experiment and test it themselves. Um, you know, uh, so so again, it's kind of going back to lessons in how science actually works. Um, so um, why don't I kind of this is kind of getting into the conversation of why flat Earth, but um, do you have any thoughts as to why they? I know there's the Tony tub, but is there any? For those of you who may not know, Sleeping Warrior Anthony Riley decided to create his own Cavendish experiment to essentially prove that gravity isn't a thing. Um, and uh, Blue, you probably have a better way of describing what this thing looked like. It really didn't look like Cavendish's experiment at all, because, well, it was in a tub. But, it really, Tony was the only one who actually, to his credit, Tony was the only one that I know of who actually tried to reproduce the experiment. So why do you have thoughts as to why they don't do it?
It's too much work,
Mm.
I think. Well, there have been others. There's there's one that was done by Chris Berry where he uh, tried the old stunt of hanging something like a couple of trailer hitches from a piece of fishing line in his garage and then moving kettle weights around, which is an absolute. Regardless. Actually seen uh, science instructors uh, try this same thing. I've seen YouTube videos of other people try that. It's pointless. I know how sensitive this torsion balance has to be, and just you moving around in the room is more than enough to cause that damn thing to move.
Mm.
You can disturb the air current, the air in the room enough that you could easily cause that to happen. So I don't pay much attention to those. Anthony was putting his inside, as you said, a tub, had a clear plastic top on it. I don't know what he was using. He was very secretive about what he made his torsion wire out of and what the weights were and all of that sort of thing. So didn't have any real good ideas about precisely what he was doing. I know one thing he did to begin with was actually didn't have a torsion wire at all. He had he had the whole thing suspended from what amounted to a little point bearing up there at the top.
I remember that. I remember you telling him that's not going to work. That kind of
Yeah,
is the whole point of the experiment.
yeah, you've left off the torsion part of it. There's nothing. So it was moving freely at will around and around as it would.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't surprise me. There was no restoring force. You're not torquing the wire. You can't. It's going to do that. Just going to go where it wants to. But at the end of the day, Anthony was never able to get that gadget of his to behave properly, and he very abruptly stopped for some reason. Now, it could be that he felt like he was getting close to actually making it work, which would have been disastrous for him. Or it could have been that he realized that if he kept going and announced that it wouldn't work, I would probably come behind him and show him that it will.
Build it better, bigger, better.
Well, build it correctly.
Yeah.
Build it correctly and test it correctly. Sure, it'll work.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Not a question.
Oh, to answer Dan in the chat, he asked, "Does it work with Cokes?" And well, yes, yes, it did. So
Yes, it did. They weren't Diet Cokes, though. I forgot to test Diet Coke. It might not have worked with Diet Coke.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you've proven that, or you've shown that density is not a factor, or at least to first order. So it really is up to someone else to test it even further, to see if if the Diet Coke doesn't work or Tab is better. I don't know.
Well, I wanted to test gold, and I put out a request to all of the viewers to, please come up with. I only needed something like 100 pounds of gold.
Only.
That would have worked. Depleted uranium, yeah, that would be nice too.
Yeah, then you start getting onto watch lists and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think you would get there pretty quickly.
Yeah,
tungsten would be a good choice.
Yeah. Tungsten.
Now the only problem with that is the damn stuff has a melting point of about 5,000 degrees. It's kind of hard to mold that into
it's kind of
on the kitchen stove,
If you were to do it again, if you were to create the experiment again, is there something you'd do differently? Is there some tweak after the fact that you would think would improve the accuracy or rather the precision of the device?
Yeah, if I did another one, I might look a little closer at the way I was positioning those large weights. I think I got it very accurate. I know I did, but I think it could be improved slightly. You have to realize that if you miss the position, center to center position of those masses by as much as 1 millimeter, you change the result by about 1%.
Okay.
So the positioning of those large masses is a very critical thing, and I don't think I did as well as I could have. But it seemed to be producing. Well, it didn't seem to. It produced very repeatable results. You can see that in the data. The standard deviations are very low.
So were the positions of the large weights, was there some kind of demarcation that you could repeatedly put them in the same position, or was this sort of a Kai by eye kind of thing?
No, I had specific stops built in there. I wonder if I've got a picture I could show. Let me look for a second.
I will make you a co-host. You should be able to share your screen.
Let's see. Let me mess around on my screen here for a second.
All right.
And below this one, this is out of the report, but it shows what we're talking about. So now let's see, share screen. That one.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. So hopefully now you can see there, of course, is the large mass, but you see this this member up here, this wooden bar, and that notch in it right there, and those slots where I can adjust the position of it. That's how I positioned and was sure that the weights were in the same place every time, or as well as I could do it.
Yeah.
And that's what I was talking about. I made that rod 3/8 of an inch in diameter, and you got a little moment arm here, so that thing would tend to bounce back and forth a little bit if you slammed it into the notch.
Okay.
Yeah, so had to be careful, and you could bow that rod slightly if you put too much pressure on it. If I did it again, I think I would probably make that thing 3/4 inch instead of 3/8 inch. But
give it a little more rigidity.
Yeah, just make it more rigid.
Okay.
And maybe improve this system slightly. But it worked well enough, and I'm happy with the results. So, yeah, that's about the only thing that I wasn't all that happy with. The rest of it seemed to go pretty good.
Yeah, can't argue with the results. I mean, less than 1% error or less than 1% difference.
Yeah.
So something else we kind of touched on it before the stream that, and this is something else I see as a problem within the whole science denying or community is the idea they don't seem to, or I should say, the concept of error seems to be thrown out the window. Like, it seems to me that the number has to be precise. You get an answer and that's the answer. But in actuality, any kind of number that you come up with, any kind of experimental result, is gonna have an error on it. If I don't see an error on it, I don't trust it. I don't trust it at all. It's meaningless to me. So,
oh, absolutely.
So yeah, what were? Can you talk about the way that you calculated errors?
Well, way I calculated errors in terms of just the analysis of this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's an example. Let's see. This is the third test series number 3. And you can see in this upper yellow highlighted cell in that spreadsheet the various experiments by date and number, and the resulting apparent value of the gravitational constant.
Mm-hmm.
So you look and you see 6.54 and 6.7 and 6.41, 5.6 and 3.3 and so forth and so on. You're not getting the same number every time.
No.
Imagine that.
And if you did, then you would know something's
wrong. Yeah, something is wrong. You're not measuring to a high enough level of precision, is what that would say.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least that's the way I would interpret it. You're missing some digits. At some point, it's varying. It has to be. So, what do you do with that? Well, you simply calculate an average value for the test, and using that information, you come up with a standard deviation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like one standard deviation. And that means that, what's one standard, Rob? 68%?
I
Is
think
that
it's, yeah, 60. I should know this. 66, 68%, somewhere in there.
somewhere in there? Yeah, 68% of the test fit within that deviation, which in this case is 1.56 times 10 to the minus 12th versus an average of 6.6 times 10 to the minus 11th. So what is that? That's 2.36% coefficient of variation.
Hmm. So yeah, any valid science experiment is you're going to have to talk about error. You're going to have to talk, and you're going to have to show just how confident you are that of that result.
Yeah.
Apparently, Dan is upset with the title of this stream.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm upset that they're not being challenged to see the difference between science and academia. Okay, I have no idea what that means. So, where was I going to go with that? So, was there a justification as to why that many tests, or was it just you got that many and was like, all right, I'm done.
Um,
I proved my point.
yeah, you always want to be sure that you've run through enough, an, a large enough quantity of tests that the results is statistically valid. Uh, and in this case, uh, I think one thing that I always looked at anyway was just simply how much deviation you're getting in the data, right? If we were getting really large variations from test to test, then maybe it warrants more testing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And by testing, you're talking about testing the machine itself rather than
yeah,
testing gravity. Yeah.
right. Uh, as to why this many tests, it just happened that that's what I decided I would do.
Okay.
At the end of the day, I don't have a better answer than that.
You certainly did enough of them, at least as far as I'm concerned.
I felt like I went beyond what was needed. Uh, but the more, the better.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't hurt to do too many tests. It only hurts when you don't do enough.
Yeah. When I was teaching physics labs, my rule was 10, 5 if you have to, if you have to, you can get away with 5. Can't get away with anything less. It needs to be repeatable at least 5 times, and if you really want to do it, it needs to be 10 or more. So yeah, you definitely met that criteria. So this instrument is being used to teach. Speaking of which, this instrument is being used to teach physics students, collegiate physics students. Do you know how that's going on?
At the moment, they're in the summer break, and it's disassembled right now. The laboratory that it was set up in was scheduled to be actually scheduled to be rebuilt last year. Before I ever took it down there to them, but things happen, and they didn't get around to doing their lab remodel. So we went ahead and set it up, and they played with it through the winter months and the spring. And actually, those damn PhDs, they got better results than I got. Damn them.
Well, they've got a slew of grad
that.
students that they can throw at the problem. So,
Yeah. So, so after doing that to me, they decided they would they, they went ahead with the remodel of the lab. So I went down and helped them take it apart, and we got it stored right now. But sometime in the next month or so, I think. I haven't checked with them lately. We'll go back and set it back up again.
Mm.
But they're quite happy.
I can only imagine. I taught Cavendish once using a piece of a task or a Pasco,
Pasco, yeah.
yeah, thing, and that was basically a piece of garbage. It was good enough for proof of concept, but there was no way that you could actually get any kind of real. If you were within 20%, you did a great job. So
Yeah, that's what it is. It's uh, these tabletop ones are generally proof of concept. They're more qualitative than they are quantitative. Honestly, you can see the effect for sure,
mhm.
but the the accuracy just isn't going to be there.
I didn't know that they got a better result than you did when they ran it.
Huh?
I didn't know they got a better result than you did when they ran it.
Oh yeah, damn those guys. They got within about 0.5%.
Well, that's a kind of a testament to testament to the quality of the instrument.
Yeah, I was actually very proud of those guys when they shared the data with me. I said, "Wow, that is astounding." But they went all out. They waited. Or they were doing their testing on Saturdays when there wasn't anybody around in the building
Yeah,
and stuff like that. And of course, they're in a nice, really well controlled environment there, and they've got a larger distance, so they've got a little better resolution on the laser than I had.
okay.
I could only get about 10 feet away, and they're able to go 20 feet or so. So that adds a bit to the precision too, I think.
Yeah, I'm surprised the dispersion.
All of those things help. But
I'm surprised the dispersion of the laser wasn't an issue for them. You know, bringing it so far back, 20 feet or another 10 feet. Because I noticed on yours, the laser spot was actually meatball kind of.
yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. It's not a dot.
no,
It's already a meatball, but it just became a slightly bigger meatball when they moved it back 20 feet.
mm,
And now, as long as you pick the same spot on the meatball all the time, which you
true.
can do
Yeah,
with a program like Tracker, and make it always pick the left edge or the very bottom or some point on the meatball, then it's okay.
yeah. So long as it's consistent, you're good.
Yeah, right,
All right.
right. Yeah, that's part of what you got to learn about it. Yeah, just what that's going to be individual preference, I guess. And yeah, I see Eric out in the chat says tracker tracked the laser spot quite well. I credit Eric. He's the guy that brought Tracker to my attention.
Oh, okay. Tracker software track those. Yeah, all right. I don't
Yeah,
think I've ever used Tracker. I've used. Have I used? No, I was going to say I don't think I've even used anything similar.
it's an open source, quite free to acquire, and it worked excellently.
So does it require a like? Assuming you plug it into any camera, or does it come up with its own? Uh, like, what kind of equipment do you need in order to get Tracker to work?
All you need is a video.
Okay.
That's all. That's all. It simply recognizes a particular object on the video screen, and it just tracks its position.
Makes sense.
So what I had set up was the camera uh, doing time lapse, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was taking a shot every 20 seconds. So I got 3 frames a minute, which gave me enough, I thought, enough resolution. Could have probably have gone a little more than that, but I think what I did was suitable for what I was trying to accomplish. But anyway, yeah, so you end up with 600 or 800 frames of video, and Tracker can go through that in a matter of about 30 seconds and plot the position of that dot. And you can calibrate everything too, uh, so that it gives you an actual distance that dot is moving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's quite impressive. Does
Yeah.
a really good job. Made my life a lot simpler.
No more veneer calipers or no more veneer scales to deal with. So
Yeah,
what are they doing with the physics folks? What are they is it a are they doing research with the instrument itself, or is it a teaching tool?
it's a teaching tool.
Okay.
That's what they're using it for. It's a teaching tool. And of course, when you're not set up when you don't have a screen set up and you're actually monitoring anything, it's just using up a 5 foot by 5 foot area floor space. So they've got it parked up next to a wall, and that's fine.
Mm.
And it just sits there until the physics students are ready to learn about gravity.
Yeah. All right. Nice. That's excellent.
Yeah, they have their very own passcode neatly tucked away in the closet, never to be seen again.
Yeah, they will never need or use. Like, just give it that, give that to away to a high school. Um, so, you're saying that you might at some point consider doing reproducing the Coulomb experiment. Um,
Yeah, that would be interesting.
I mean, I know you've been still putting out flat Earth content, or what have you. Are you still planning on keeping up with that, or uh, moving in a different direction?
Well, as they continue to put out uh, things that are suitably stupid, yeah, I'll keep doing videos, I guess.
Okay.
Although it seems to have tailed off here lately, and so much of it is just recycle. You know, I don't know how many damn times I need to explain why airplanes don't dip their nose when they fly. I mean, that's been beaten to death.
Yeah.
Sextants are about becoming like that.
Mm-hmm.
We're just repeating ourselves time and time again. But occasionally they do come up with a real gem. Yeah. So I'll stay on the lookout for that stuff. But yeah, I have not got any real different plans for the channel. I think I'll just continue doing what I'm doing.
Okay.
Uh, but I would like to find another experiment to play around with.
Yeah, that would be fun. That would be fun to see. That would be fun to see. Well,
Yeah, well, we could always measure little g, like with an incline
inclined plane. That'll do it.
plane. That would be fun.
Yeah. Or simple pendulum. Do it that
Or
way too.
yeah, or a simple pendulum. Exactly.
So, yeah. One of the things that I wanted to, or I was, one of the things that I would like to do in my infinite amount of free time is, I've built or designed a number of astronomy labs, and wrote a astronomy lab book. But one of the things I wanted to do was to make a collection or have a lab that was specifically reproducing fundamental uh, astronomical experiments. So Eratosthenes would be one. Galileo's observations of or measurements of sunspots or stellar rotation, and also his what's the word I'm looking for? Heights and depths of craters. using simple geometry and things of that nature, and all the way up to, say, looking at light curves of Cepheids. Because I think that, you know, doing experiments and doing, labs that you find in books or whatever, that's fine. But I think there's a certain disconnect from why these experiments were done in the first place. What were they trying to actually do, or what they were actually trying to find, that I think gets lost with the, with kind of regular folks out there. I don't know. Do you see it important? See it as important that these older original experiments get redone?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think that's where we came from. That's how we got where we are today, is with those very fundamental experiments that have been performed, and some of them going back to hundreds of years BC, like Eratosthenes.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important that we don't lose track of that stuff, because that's what's provided the roadmap for that thing we now so fondly refer to as the scientific method, quote unquote. As you and I were laughing about it a little bit before the broadcast, of course, that's there is no scientific method per se, just written out like a cookbook.
Yeah,
that doesn't exist.
No.
What works for one experiment is not going to work for the next one. But it is a thought process that allows us to, and I think Neil deGrasse Tyson said one thing one time that impressed me. He said it's simply a method of being certain that you haven't convinced yourself that something's true that really isn't true, or even worse, something's not true that actually is.
Yeah.
So now, as long as you go through whatever steps you have to go through to eliminate the possibility that you're tricking yourself, you're fulfilling the spirit of the scientific method. And I happen to agree with that.
Yeah. The scientific method is I think, as I said before, the stream is sort of is a strong guideline. I wouldn't say it's a codified method, but it's a strong guideline to ensure that our biases are kind of held in check, so that things are repeatable, and so that somebody else can come along and say, all right, I have confidence in your result because your experiment is sound. I can take that experiment, I can reproduce it. So yeah, the scientific method is vital, but I agree that there's a vast misinterpretation of what the scientific method actually is. And I don't know. I think experiments like this are one of the showing experiments like this, doing what you've done, I think is not vital, but important in demonstrating that principle. That's a word.
Yeah, we all, I think all too often these guys get the idea that it's very simple. You just say, here's the independent variable, and there's the dependent variable, and that's all I got. Well, that's never all you got.
No.
Ever. I've never in my life seen anything where you just simply have that simple a test where you only have a single independent variable.
Yeah, maybe in the basic physics laboratories or lab experiments in Physics 101, but in reality, I've never seen it. I've never seen something like that.
No, we were talking about all of them, with Cavendish, right? All the various things that could affect it. there's one in particular that we want to test for, and that is the presence of that second, mass there in its position. And that's what we're trying to determine what effect that has. We don't want to be fooled by having electrostatics come into play, or magnetics come into play, or some temperature variation come into play. We have to control all those things. Even if we can't eliminate them, we've got to at least make sure they stay constant.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think a lot of people miss.
Yeah.
It's not that simple. And then every experiment has got its own set of uh, of errors, systematic errors built into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to account for that stuff too.
Yeah. One of the, I think, again, something that I don't think is really appreciated is you really have to think very carefully about what could be affecting your what could be affecting your experiment. As you pointed out, electrostatics, maybe that plays a factor. Temperature, that plays a factor. If you just go into it sort of blindly and just assume that there's really the only thing happening here is either gravity is a thing or it isn't, then you really do miss a lot of the details or the unknown variables that could potentially explain what is actually going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they don't totally mask it, what they will do very easily is affect the result in terms of the measurement you're trying to make.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to be very careful that you don't let that happen. And I mean, the idea is to with this, for me, the idea was to come up with the gravitational constant as accurately as I could get it. So I don't want anything shoving that number up or down from the true value that we're trying to measure, and lots of things have an effect on that. That type of torsion balance, like Cavendish used, has got all kinds of little things in it, built into it. They're just unavoidable.
Mm-hmm.
That result in systematic errors. I mean, for instance, the large mass is primarily attracting that small mass that's closest to it, but it's also attracting the other one that's on the other end of the beam, and it's trying to
Yes.
rotate it the wrong direction.
Oh, yeah.
So we got a little problem there. We've got to take that into account if we want an accurate number. And then, you think of other things like that. You think, well, wait a minute. I assumed that the beam that the weights are hanging from has no mass at all, but that isn't true. We know that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
I measured the mass of that thing. It's 128 grams. So there's a little bit of an effect on the moment of inertia. So we need to account for that.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. The big ball is attracting that damn thing too. Oh, hold on. now I got to correct that thing. So, you end up with a whole series of confounding minor systematic errors that have to be accounted for if you expect your result to be correct.
Mm-hmm.
And Cavendish did that. He did the same thing.
Yeah, and again, he did it before the 1800s, which is just a kind of a very impressive feat in and upon itself.
Yeah.
Considering the technology that he had at his disposal.
It always amazes me to read through that, through his paper, and read through his thought process and all the care he took, and all of the things he considered, all of the stuff I just talked about. I mean, I didn't think that up. He thought it up. I didn't have to think it up. He came up with it.
So where did you find the original source material? Like, where did you find his paper? Just Google search, or is there a, if somebody else wanted to do something similar, to find one of these older experiments, these fundamental experiments, where would they go to find these papers?
Through as I recall, a lot of Google searching, but things like this were published in the proceedings of the Royal Society. So that's a starting point. You can Google the Royal Society of England and the experiment that you're interested in, and probably find it that way. Now, for Cavendish, if you just want to read it, I've got it, and in fact, I've got a report, and I'll be glad to stick a link to that somewhere.
Yeah, if you send me a link, I don't know if you can put it in chat. I think you're a mod, so.
I don't know.
Well, if you're right, I need to make that happen. But if you send me a link, I can put the link into the description of the stream. So if folks watch it, then they can. The link will be there.
Yeah, let me sort that out right now. Hang on a second, because I do have. That's on a Google Drive. Let's see. It's not only my babblings, but it's also the back part of it is the entire Cavendish paper.
Oh, okay.
So let's see. I need to find the button here for text. Well, where is it? Tell you what I'll do. I'll put it in Discord.
Okay. Let's see. I'm wondering if I could. I don't know if that did anything. What that it's doing. Okay. Hopefully that didn't screw up the stream.
Seems to still be up there.
All right. Excellent. So where are you putting this in Discord?
Just in a DM to you.
Oh, okay. Oh, here we go.
It looks like it let me put it out in the YouTube chat too.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there it is. Folks want to look at his report and the Cavendish paper. Go nuts.
Lots of good stuff there.
Yeah.
In the Cavendish paper. It's a little hard to read in places. And I warn you ahead of time, don't try to follow his math. They did odd things. Actually, the way Cavendish goes about it is a lot of proportionalities, Yeah. And you end up you'll make yourself crazy if you're a fanatic about dimensions of things, because none of the damn dimensions work. I mean, it just doesn't. When you start goofing around with proportions like that.
Okay.
So you get quantities being calculated that just don't make any sense dimensionally. But the logic, if you can follow through the logic, it's quite sound.
Yeah, because if you're dealing with proportionalities, then you're missing out the constants, and the constants are usually there for bookkeeping in terms of dimensionality.
Right.
So,
Exactly. Yeah, well, that's why G's got those oddball dimensions it has, right?
So I haven't.
Newton meter squared per kilogram squared.
Uh,
What?
yeah, the units
Well,
on certain constants. I just all right, okay. It's just kind of like garbly goop, but it's just we'll just throw in some constants in there and just for bookkeeping to
yep.
make it work. Um, so I haven't looked at the. I have to be honest. I haven't looked at the Cavendish paper, the original Cavendish paper. How long was it, or
Oh,
how long is it rather?
the paper itself
Yeah.
is I don't know, 50 pages or something like that.
Jesus. Okay.
A lot of data.
Okay. Yeah.
A
The
lot
reason.
of it is you can just skip through. It's just data,
Yeah.
and some of it at the back end is Cavendish fiddling around, convincing himself that the attraction of the wood cabinet itself didn't have any effect, and things like that.
Mm,
Uh, a bunch of things. I didn't even bother since he'd already done it. There's no point in me doing it.
true. Yeah. The reason why I ask is one of the frustrating things about astronomy is take Hubble's law for example. His paper in I think it was 1931. Basically, the way he showed the relationship that we now know as the Hubble's law of the farther away a galaxy is, the faster it's moving. That paper, I think, is 3 pages.
Yeah.
So they just kind of yada yada a lot of the background that we don't take for granted now. So hey, if I tried to publish a 3 page paper on something like that, I would be laughed out of the journal. And so I'm glad to know that Cavendish was not so. What's the word I'm looking for? Uh, was a lot more verbose than some of these astronomers.
Oh, he did a very he did an excellent job, I think, uh, of explaining the history of it. You know how he came to come by that experiment,
Mm,
which wasn't his originally. You know, we're talking about that.
yeah.
Originally, it was Reverend Michelle who had the idea, but he was an older gentleman, and he passed away before he was ever able to actually do the experiment itself. And he handed it over to a guy named Wollaston. All of these guys were members of the Royal Society there, and Wollaston really was not in a position to do it, so he passed it on to Cavendish, and that's how Cavendish ended up with it.
Mm,
Cavendish looked at what Michelle had done to begin with, and he wasn't happy with a number of the things that Michelle had planned on doing. So he basically just said, "Okay, well, that's nice. I'll start over again." he, for I think Cavendish really wanted those lead balls to be 12 inches in diameter. He really wanted that. And Michelle had originally said, "Nah, they ought to be only need to be 8 inches." Well, I even took it down to 6, right? But Cavendish, I guess, just because he could, said, "Okay, well, I think I'll do 12 inches. And that's 350 pounds." Oh yeah. And then he rigged up, better ways of moving them. Uh, I think Michelle had originally planned on just manually positioning the weights rather than having some kind of rotating apparatus.
mm,
But I think what Cavendish did was brilliant, absolutely. And for that reason, I duplicated,
mm.
or as close as I could.
Yeah. How much of the your experiment essentially is guesswork in the sense that obviously we talked about the torsion wire, but was there any other part of the experiment that wasn't exactly detailed in depth that you had to sort of figure out on your own?
Um, Not really. I think if you read through the writings there of Cavendish, you'll see that he provides enough information that you can be pretty confident in build an exact replica of the machine if you really wanted to. I think all the information is present.
That's impressive.
But again, I changed a lot of it just because of just physical limitations. I didn't have enough room in the shop to make a torsion balance that was 6 feet long,
Mm-hmm.
like his. I could get away with 4 feet. So, okay. My balance is two-thirds the size of his.
Mm-hmm.
All right, there's a difference. I could make the weight chambers exactly like his, and I did. Uh, but then the mass of those large lead balls, I absolutely can't handle 350 pounds.
Yeah.
Nor would I have any idea where you go get one. I mean, it costs a fortune to get somebody to make one. I did find out, though, that they use 50-pound fishing weights, oddly enough, on these big nets, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Oh,
so
really?
that's kind of a standard. I was able to get a couple of 50-pound lead weights that way. And then it's just a matter of sitting down, going through the physics and saying, okay, here's what I've got. These are the masses I have. Uh, Figure out what the moment of inertia of all this stuff is and all those things, and then see what sort of torsion wire it's going to take.
Mm-hmm.
What do you need? Uh, what what diameter do you need, and what sort of Young's modulus do you need? And once you know those things, you can quite accurately predict the behavior of the balance. And I did that
Mm.
uh, surprisingly accurately too. You can predict the period of oscillation within a few percent.
Science works.
You can predict the deflection within a very tight range. So uh, that's how I started, really.
Mm.
Well,
So,
the last thing you want to have happen is, you know, you build all this and then you figure out you made some fundamental error in judgment, just guessing at it. And now you've boxed yourself in to the point that you can't fix it.
you basically have to restart and just do it all over
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
So,
So I
yes.
know I spent several weeks doing nothing but playing with a spreadsheet and fiddling around with various sizes of things just to convince myself that it was going to work.
Mm. So, yeah, so a lot of the sort of effort that you had to investigate when building this was simply due to scaling it down or getting it to fit into your space rather than the space that Cavendish had.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But then again, I'm sure Cavendish had to go through a lot of that too. That
Oh,
part
yeah.
is not covered in his writings. I would love to be able to talk to the old boy now and see how he came up with it, because I mean, the only thing he changed from his original device, he made the wire a little too small,
Mm.
and so it made the balance too sensitive. And he realized that after running the very first test, although he ran 3 using that wire. But he quickly changed that out and did the balance of his 27 observations with a larger wire. But he had something going on. He knew how to do something or the other to have gotten it that close to begin with. Or there was a hell of a lot of screwing around, experimenting that he doesn't talk about. One of the two.
I would probably think the latter on that because, as I mentioned before, with the research that I've done in the past, there's a lot that doesn't get published. There's a lot that doesn't get talked about, because it's really just trial and error. It's you just beat yourself up against a wall until that wall breaks, or you do, and you go down certain roads, they don't work out, and you. For me, when I particularly one particular paper that I was doing, I was going down so many blind alleys that I was like, I need to write this. I need to put this in the paper. And my advisor was like, no, there's no real use for it. There's really no good scientific reason to have that in there. But I put in the appendix anyway, because there was just so much work there that it's like I didn't want anyone else to go down those rabbit holes. So I'm like, I need to caution someone else. If you're going to do this experiment again, if you're going to do these sets of observations again, do not do this, because I lost a lot of time going down that road. So yeah, I can imagine that with Cavendish, there's probably weeks and weeks or months and months of things that he didn't write about, because they were just kind of dead ends.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'll go back and share my screen again for a second. This is also in the paper. You'll see it, but let's see. There it is. Hopefully you can see that. Make it a little bit bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So I used, actually I used the Cavendish experience and what he talks about in his paper first, to see if my design calculations were accurate, and if they were accurately predicting the sort of performance that he had already measured. Seemed like a good thing to do.
Yeah.
That was his first wire. Predicted a period of, about 25 minutes, 25 and a half minutes for oscillation, and a deflection of 26 millimeters or something like that. And then I plugged in the numbers for his second wire. Actually, he never said really what he did, what his second wire did, but it looks reasonable. I used his actual period of oscillation to find what wire diameter he had changed it to.
Okay.
All seemed fairly reasonable to me.
Yeah.
So here are the calculations for mine. This was the first test series, the 330 gram weights. And you can see that I got a predicted period of oscillation of 924 seconds, and we got really close to that. Mm-hmm. And a laser deflection of 30.5 millimeters, and we got really close to that too. And then I did it again for the other wires. There's one for tungsten. Again, giving about let's see, predicted was 16.68 minutes, deflection 36.66 millimeters. So let's go back and see how we did. If I can find the damn test again. Oh. I think we got pretty close to those numbers, if I recall correctly. There's the third test series. 900 and, yeah, let me size it down just a little bit. Yeah, I was using, that's a corrected time. 958 seconds. What did we say it was? Something like that.
I think so, yeah.
And 33 millimeters deflection of the laser versus 36. So, not exact, but
definitely within the ballpark.
Yeah. But it was quite comforting to know that I had it, that at least I felt like I had predicted the predictive capability to say, yes, this is going to work.
Yeah, that's yet another important part of science is the proof of concept. You got to basically run the numbers before you actually even sit down in a lab to see whether or not what you are going to do is going to do what you want it to do,
Yeah, yeah,
ultimately. So
yeah. So the physics works.
yeah, so it's always nice to see that. Let's see. I think there's a question in the chat from Dan. Oh, hi Jose. JG is in the house. Um, Apparently he's a troll. Anyway, um, let's see. Wikipedia says the gravitational constant does not appear explicitly in Cavendish's work. It says instead the result was originally expressed as a specific gravity of Earth, or equivalently the mass of the Earth. His experiment gave the first accurate values for these geophysical constants. Admittedly, I don't know what that means to me or what that means to me. Can you guys elaborate? I think we talked about it at the beginning of the stream, but uh, Blue, you want to talk about essentially what did Cavendish want to do and what was how did that relate into to G, big G?
Yeah, sure. Cavendish, if you read his, go to that section at the back of my paper where his is published. The title of it, unless I'm misquoting it, it says "Experiments to Determine the Density of the Earth." And that's literally what he set out to do.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the reason that G is not mentioned is because G wasn't used in Newton's universal law of gravitation in those days. If you go all the way back to the Principia where Newton published his work, it effectively says that the apparent force of attraction between two masses is proportional to, not equal to, the force is proportional to the product of those masses divided by the square of the distance between their centers. Now, the simple fact that it says proportional to implies there must be a constant of proportionality present. It has to be there. But it wasn't known, and it wasn't, they didn't know what it was, so they didn't even stick it in for whatever reason. And it wasn't until about 100 years after Cavendish that it became a part of the equation as we see it today. And I think C.V. Boyes is the guy that is generally credited with adding that in there, although it was always implied.
Mm.
There had to be a constant of proportionality involved. Just didn't know what it was. And Cavendish may or may not have realized that at the time he was effectively measuring that constant. He wasn't interested in that. He just wanted to know what the density of the Earth was, the specific gravity, in other words, because that's what he related it to was the density of water, and got within about 1% of the figure we use today. So that's sort of the history of it, Dan.
Okay. Yeah. Well, great conversation, but unfortunately I've got to shut the stream down. I've got to get back to my day job, as it were. So,
Oh, goodness.
yeah, I've got a couple of lectures that I need to prepare. But thank you, Blue, for coming on. Brilliant as always.
Well, thank you, Rob. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I will put your channel in the description for those of you who aren't familiar with Blue Marble Science. I will put his channel in the description. It is excellent. He makes excellent content dealing with both gravity and also with flat Earth. So before I sign off, I hate saying this, but if you enjoyed this, if you enjoyed this content, then please like, share, and subscribe. And if you are interested in supporting my outreach, the outreach for George Mason Observatory, please consider becoming a patron of me. The Patreon link is in the description. All right. So, yeah. Peace out, guys. See you later.